So you wake up, you silence your phone alarm, jump in the shower, put on some, I don't know, pop-punk playlist.
Right, a normal morning.
Yeah, exactly. You stop at a yellow light on your way to work and you tell your coworker their new shoes are, like, lit. And in just the first hour of your day, you have unknowingly interacted with the architectural legacy of Black American inventors, artists, and creators, like at least 5 times.
At least 5, yeah.
And that is exactly the premise of our deep dive today. We are looking at a massive, really perspective-shifting idea drawn from the text, Architects of the American Identity.
Which is such a great piece.
It really is. And the main argument is that Black creators didn't just contribute a few things to a pre-existing American culture. They are the central architects of what we globally recognize as American.
Yeah, and it forces us to completely reevaluate that whole myth of the great American melting pot. Because we tend to visualize American history as this stew where everything just sort of simmered together into a single homogenous tradition. But when you examine the actual mechanics of how this culture was built,
like the day-to-day stuff.
Exactly, from our daily routines to our global exports, that homogenous myth just falls apart. I mean, Black history is not a separate entity operating on some parallel track. It is the driving force that impacts the daily, everyday life of all Americans.
Yeah.
And specifically, including white America across music, language, tech, fashion, and sports.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yep.
Because I feel like the best way to understand an abstract idea like culture is to look at the invisible framework of our routines.
For sure.
And before we get into the gadgets we use or like the slang we throw around, we have to look at what we listen to. The literal foundation of the modern American sound.
The soundtrack of daily life.
Exactly. Now, we all know the branches of the family tree, right? Like Elvis Presley, the Beatles. But the text points out that we often forget the roots. Artists like Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and Sister Rosetta Tharpe.
Well, I'd challenge the whole roots and branches metaphor altogether.
Oh, really? How come?
Think of modern music not as a family tree, but as an operating system.
Okay.
Blues and gospel are the base code. They are the foundational architecture. Everything else from, a 1950s rock and roll track to whatever today's top 40 pop hit is.
Right.
It's just a software update running on that original architecture, like the syncopation, the call and response structures, the specific emotional delivery, it all incubated in Black communities. Without that base code, artists like Elvis would have sounded completely different.
Let me push back here for a second, though, because music evolves universally, right? People mix and match all the time across the globe.
Sure.
So is it fair to say that without gospel, soul, funk, and blues, the entire landscape of global popular music simply wouldn't exist as we know it? Like, wouldn't some other form of upbeat dance music have just organically developed in the 1950s anyway?
I mean, upbeat music, yes. But the specific global phenomenon we call American popular music, no. Absolutely not.
Wow, really?
Yeah. If you strip away the blues scale, the swung notes of jazz, and the rhythmic complexities born from gospel and R&B, you remove the very tension and release that defines modern pop and rock. You can't substitute those mechanics.
Yeah.
Take Sister Rosetta Tharpe. She was out there pioneering heavy guitar distortion and aggressive rhythmic picking long before the electric guitar was ever considered like a staple of youth rebellion. The literal mechanics of rock were engineered by her.
So when millions of white Americans today are streaming R&B playlists while working at their desks or, listening to hip-hop while exercising,
they are actively engaging with that operating system, and it goes even further than that. Consider massive stadium country music concerts.
Oh, right.
The structural mechanics of country music are deeply, inextricably linked to the blues and early Black string bands. I mean, the banjo itself traces its origins directly back to West African instruments.
That's wild to think about.
It is. The point the text makes is that Black musical innovation is the inescapable backdrop of everyday American life. You cannot subtract these genres and still have an American sound. You would just have a disconnected collection of, European folk songs and classical traditions.
Which transitions perfectly into the next layer of this architectural blueprint.
Yeah.
Because the music we stream obviously carries lyrics, and those lyrics inevitably bleed into the way we communicate every single day.
Language is the ultimate viral medium.
It really is. And the text lists out some incredibly common terms that dominate the vocabulary of our culture right now.
Right.
Words like cool, hip, woke, throw shade, lit, and no cap. You hear these everywhere.
Yeah.
But again, let me play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
Because we see these words constantly on television and social media today. Isn't this just a modern internet phenomenon? Like,
Yeah.
is it just TikTok drastically speeding up how teenagers invent words?
That is a super common assumption, but no, the underlying pipeline remains exactly the same as it was 50 years ago. Social media is just a faster delivery mechanism, you know?
Yeah.
These phrases and communication styles do not just spontaneously generate on the internet. They incubate in Black communities and cultural spaces long before crossing geographic and racial lines to become mainstream American slang.
It's fascinating to look at a word like cool.
Yeah.
It feels like the most universal American adjective in existence.
Yeah.
But it didn't start that way, did it?
Not at all. Cool has a very specific historical lineage in Black jazz culture.
Oh.
Originally, it wasn't just a synonym for neat or whatever. It was a posture.
Like a literal physical posture.
More like a survival mechanism.
Oh.
It was a way of maintaining composure and detached awareness in a highly segregated, often really hostile society. It literally meant keeping your temperature down.
Wow.
And then over decades, that deeply specific cultural tool was adopted by broader American society until the original context was entirely washed away.
And we see that same life cycle with a term like woke. And I want to be really clear here. We're looking at this strictly from a linguistic and historical standpoint based on the text.
Right, absolutely.
We are remaining completely impartial here, without taking any stance or endorsing any modern ideological viewpoints that surround the word today. We're just reporting on its origins.
Exactly. And historically, its origins trace straight back to Black culture. Mid-century, it was an incredibly specific term describing awareness of social realities and systemic issues. It was an internal community watchword.
Which just perfectly illustrates that pipeline you mentioned. A term originates as a highly nuanced tool within a specific cultural space.
Mhm.
It gets used in music or spoken word.
Yep.
And then as broader America consumes that art, the language gets extracted, stripped of its original nuanced context, and just deployed as standard popular culture.
They are essentially coding the language that the rest of the country uses to sound relevant.
Okay, so we've established how this invisible framework dictates our music and our language. Let's move from the arts to the physical hardware.
The literal infrastructure of our lives.
Right, because we are using those cultural slang terms on our smartphones. But the literal hardware inside those phones was also shaped by Black innovation.
This is where the concept of the architect becomes very literal.
Totally. Uncovering the inventors in this text was mind-blowing. Let's talk about James West. He co-invented the electric microphone.
Which is a massive deal.
I had never even heard his name, but I am literally speaking into a descendant of his invention right now.
To understand the magnitude of what West invented, you have to understand the problem he solved. Before his work in the 1960s, microphones required these bulky external power sources or heavy magnets to convert sound waves into electrical signals.
So they were basically huge and cumbersome.
Exactly. West and his research partner figured out how to use a material called an electret, which is basically a polymer foil that can hold a permanent electrical charge. Kind of like how a permanent magnet holds a magnetic charge.
So they essentially froze an electric charge into...
Into a piece of plastic foil, yeah. In simple terms. And because this material was permanently charged, you no longer needed a bulky battery just to capture sound.
Oh, wow.
So when sound waves hit this ultra-thin foil, it vibrates next to a metal backplate, and that translates the sound into an electrical signal. This meant microphones could suddenly become microscopic, super cheap to produce, and incredibly reliable.
That is the ultimate invisible framework, because that means every single smartphone, every computer, the video conferencing tools we use every day, they all rely on this.
Yep. And hearing aids, too. When someone relies on a hearing aid to navigate their world, they are literally utilizing a bridge built by a Black inventor.
And the text points out that this architectural legacy extends right into modern medicine, too.
Oh, fundamentally.
Dr. Patricia Bath. I found her story so profound. She developed the laser phaco technique for cataract surgery. The text notes that millions of people, specifically including elderly white Americans, have had their vision preserved because of this.
It's an incredible innovation.
But how did her invention actually change the procedure?
Well, before Dr. Bath's innovation, treating cataracts was highly invasive. Surgeons essentially had to manually cut into the eye and use mechanical tools to literally grind or scrape away the clouded lens.
Ugh, that sounds awful.
It was risky, imprecise, and the recovery time was significant. But Dr. Bath envisioned a way to use laser technology instead. So she invented the laser phaco probe, which utilizes a laser to just precisely vaporize the cataract.
So she took an abrasive, dangerous mechanical surgery and turned it into an elegant, highly precise laser procedure.
Exactly. It turned a terrifying prospect into a routine outpatient miracle. We're talking about preserving the basic dignity of sight. Her breakthrough isn't just a side note, it's a central pillar of modern ophthalmology.
Okay, so we've got smartphones and life-altering medical lasers. What about the basic everyday act of just walking or driving down the street?
Well, you mentioned the yellow light in your opening scenario. That brings us to Garrett Morgan.
Right. He invented an early traffic signal. But again, it's about the mechanics of it. There were traffic signals before him, right? Just like stop and go.
Yeah, early signals were binary, stop and go. The problem was that the transition between the two was completely abrupt and really dangerous.
Because there was no warning.
Exactly. Carriages, early cars, pedestrians, they were constantly colliding because there was no warning that the right-of-way was about to change. So Garrett Morgan invented a T-shaped traffic signal that added a third critical position.
The yellow light.
A universal warning state that stopped traffic in all directions before the signal changed completely.
He engineered caution right into the infrastructure, meaning every single driver today interacts with his safety legacy.
Every single time they go through an intersection.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. Lonnie Johnson. Because his story just shows this unbelievable range of engineering genius. If you grew up in the last few decades, you definitely had his invention in your backyard.
The super soaker.
Yes. But I always assumed someone just wanted to make, a better water gun. But he was an aerospace engineer, wasn't he?
He was. He was working on missions for NASA, including the Galileo spacecraft to Jupiter. He was actually experimenting with a heat pump in his bathroom, trying to find an environmentally friendly heat transfer fluid.
As you do.
Right. So he hooks up a nozzle to his sink, the pressure builds up, and it shoots this powerful stream of water all the way across the room. And he realized that using pressurized air to drive fluid dynamics could make an incredible toy.
So he took fluid dynamics and thermodynamics and applied it to a plastic toy. That's amazing.
It is, but the crucial point the text makes is that his innovations didn't stop at toys. The same mind that invented the super soaker is also responsible for highly complex engineering work in solid-state energy storage and thermodynamics.
It really illustrates the breadth of this influence.
Yeah.
We're moving from life-saving medical procedures and traffic safety to the microphones in our pockets and our backyard toys. So we have the technology, the media, the language. And when you combine global media with these physical platforms, it acts as an amplifier, right? Elevating individuals into global icons. Which brings us to the visual and physical culture, fashion and sports.
Sports is arguably the most visible arena where you can track this architectural influence in real time. The modern landscape of sports was almost entirely rewired by Black athletes.
We're looking at massive figures mentioned in the text. Michael Jordan, Muhammad Ali, Serena Williams. The argument isn't just that they were the best at their sports, but that they changed the whole ecosystem surrounding the games.
Take Michael Jordan. Before him, athletes were primarily viewed as just employees of a franchise. The team was the brand.
Right.
Jordan and the marketing built around him completely inverted that model. The player became the brand, superseding the team and eventually transcending the sport entirely.
And we see that same disruption with Serena Williams. She completely shattered the aesthetic and cultural standards of a historically country club sport.
She brought an unapologetic power that forever changed how women athletes are perceived globally.
And beyond the game itself, the text talks about athlete activism. And again, just impartially relaying the source material here, without taking sides on any specific modern political protests, Muhammad Ali created the blueprint for how a modern athlete uses global media attention.
He really did. The idea that a sports figure has a platform to speak on societal realities and shape public discourse was largely forged by him. It turned the athlete from a mere entertainer into a central figure in American sociological debates.
Let's follow that economic thread, because that brings us to the business of style. Sneaker culture, streetwear, athletic fashion.
It mirrors the exact same trajectory we discussed with slang.
Right. The text points out how styles that begin in Black neighborhoods and with Black athletes often take years to become mainstream.
They exist as local cultural currency first, and then eventually they bloom into these billion-dollar fashion trends and luxury brand collaborations. The high fashion world is essentially monetizing the architectural blueprint designed by Black creators.
So what does this all mean when we put the music, the tech, the language, and the culture together?
It brings us back to the overarching theme of the source material. It's a total rejection of the word contribution.
Okay.
Historically, we're taught that American culture was built by one dominant group, and marginalized groups simply contributed a few diverse trivia facts. But the reality is they are the central architects of it.
It makes me think of this analogy. The way we usually talk about American history, it's like we're looking at this massive, beautiful house, and we're standing outside praising the paint job, and we say, oh, and Black Americans contributed some lovely throw pillows to the living room.
Right,
But the
right.
reality is screaming at us. No, they poured the concrete foundation,
Yeah.
they framed the walls, they wired the electricity you use to keep the lights on.
That's a great way to put it. Treating Black history as something separate from American history just creates an inaccurate picture of the country. It is the driving force that shapes how people travel, work, entertain themselves, and interact daily.
You literally cannot separate the daily life of white America or the global perception of what it means to be American from the Black creators, inventors, and innovators who built it.
You cannot. If you attempt to separate it, you're attempting to dismantle the culture itself.
Well, this has been an incredibly eye-opening journey. We've gone from the roots of rock and roll to the fluid dynamics of water toys and the lasers fixing our vision. I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It was a pleasure, and I actually want to leave you with one final thought to ponder that builds on the source material.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine you could instantly subtract every single element from your day that originated from a Black innovator, artist, or inventor. The music goes silent, your phone's microphone disappears, the traffic lights vanish, and the very slang you use to describe the world is gone. The question isn't just what your day would look like. The question is, would you even recognize it as American?
Wow, that is a powerful question and definitely something for all of us to mull over today. Thank you so much for joining us, and to everyone listening, keep questioning the history behind the things you take for granted every day. Catch you next time.